Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. I'm Dr. Carmen Imes, Associate Professor of Old Testament at Biola University. We are midway through a series of videos on the passage in Exodus 21 that deals with the so-called slavery laws. If you've not watched the first two videos in this series, I recommend you go back and do that first so that we can set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. Now, these first two videos and the short that I made to go along with them have provoked a lot of controversy. And there are people online who are mudslinging, calling me a liar, saying I'm disingenuous or ignorant, and that I should try reading the Bible for once. And so I've noticed we have, number one, a failure of civil discourse around these issues. People feel very strongly about slavery in the Bible. And so I want to just say from the outset that I am making a good faith attempt to read the scriptures and to read with the grain of the scriptures and explain what I think is going on there. I've noticed in people's comments and responses to me three persistent hermeneutical problems. Number one, the habit of reading individual verses or short passages in isolation from their literary context, so ignoring all the rest of the laws and taking these out by themselves. Number two, judging ancient practices by modern standards. There are going to be things in the Bible that don't sit well with us because our culture and our context are so different. I'm not saying that truth is relative. I'm not saying that slavery is okay. But we have a tendency to read into or read against the text because of what we think ought to be the case. Number three, confusing description of ancient practices with prescription. Yes, there was slavery in the ancient world. Yes, we see evidence of slavery in Bible times on the pages of Scripture. Did God promote or condone or encourage that slavery? No, he did not. So those are three persistent problems that I've seen in the conversations online. Was there mistreatment of women in the ancient world? Yes, undoubtedly there was. We see evidence of it in the scriptures. Does God command people to mistreat women? No. God is constantly setting up guardrails and putting parameters around people's behavior to regulate non-ideal situations. And that's what's happening here in the Mishpatim, or the judicial decisions of Exodus 21. Again, I have a video on that. If you go back a couple weeks, you can see that. Now, one of the number one objection that's been raised to what I've released so far is that I'm not paying attention to Leviticus 25. I actually have a video on Leviticus 25, and there's a card here where you can click on it and go watch that video and see kind of an overview of what's going on in Leviticus 25 and why might it seem like God is allowing slavery of foreign slaves. It's true that Exodus 21 is specifically targeted at fellow Hebrews, but that does not mean that slavery was a widespread or encouraged practice with foreigners. So just a couple of key points from that other video. Number one, Leviticus chapter 25 is a chapter on land use. It is very focused on the use of the land inside the promised land. Foreigners cannot own land within ancient Israel because God has given it as a gift to his covenant people, and it's divided up for the 12 tribes. So in verse 23, we see that foreigners cannot own land unless they become covenant members. Can they be mistreated? Verse 46 makes it sound like, so it says you can't mistreat fellow Israelites, but what about foreigners? Can they be mistreated? And the clear answer to this one is no. Verse 35, if you just back up a little bit to verse 35, it makes the treatment of foreigners the gold standard for treatment of fellow Israelites who fall on hard times. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor, treat them as you would a foreigner. That is to say, treat them well. So the only way that you can conclude that chattel slavery is allowed with foreigners is if you if you fail to read all of the rest of the context, which consistently and continually tells the Israelites that they are to treat immigrants and foreigners well, and they should know better than to mistreat them because they were foreigners in Egypt. Now, here are some factors to remember that are in the context. If we're reading all of the biblical law, we'll find that it's not possible to read Leviticus 25 as a widespread capture and enslavement of foreigners. Number one, the Israelites are not free, and the land is not theirs. The land belongs to Yahweh, and so do they. They are Yahweh's Eved, or his servants. Foreigners can piggyback on this relationship or this arrangement by working for Israelites. And the reason why foreigners are allowed to be in a permanent position of servitude with Israelites is because they can't own land like the Israelites can. So setting them free after 7 years would result in impoverishment, instant impoverishment. They would be cut off from the very land that needs to support them. Chapter 20, verse 10 of Exodus institutes Sabbath rest even for servants and foreigners. Kidnapping is strictly prohibited in 21:16. There's a death penalty for killing a servant in 21 verses 20 and 21. So the lives of servants are treated with the same dignity and worth as the lives of other Israelite citizens. Accidental death is taken seriously in 21 verse 32. There's a release of servants for permanent injury. So a master who permanently injures a servant has just lost the rest of the labor that they owed him. The bodies of servants do not belong to their employers. Mistreatment is prohibited in 22:21. Taking advantage of vulnerable people is prohibited in 22:22. There's no interest allowed to be charged on loans in 22:25. No denying justice to the poor in 23:6. No oppression of foreigners or migrants in 23:9. And the fields are supposed to be left unplowed every 7th year in order to support those who are at the margins of society in 23:10. All of these factors and more lead me to believe that it's not proper to call this slavery. What happens with foreigners in Leviticus 25 is not slavery. It's a means of permanent attachment to an Israelite household so that someone can survive and even flourish in the land. Now, today we are looking at chapter 21, verses 7 through 11. These are some of the most challenging verses of this passage. Okay, so picking it up in Exodus 21, verse 7. If a man sells his daughter as an amah, she shall not leave as the male servants leave. If she is troublesome in the eyes of her master who has claimed her for himself, then he must let her be ransomed. He is not allowed to sell her to foreign people because he broke the agreement with her. But if he has claimed her for his son, he must treat her in accordance with the rights of daughters. If he takes another for himself, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. But if he does not give her these three, then she may leave without paying any silver. Okay, right off the bat, this passage seems objectionable to modern readers because what is a man doing selling his daughter? You noticed that I did not translate the word amah because I didn't want to predispose us to thinking of it in a particular way. This is a kind of servant, a female servant, but she's not just coming into the household to do the dishes. It's clear from the context and from the clues in this text that she is marrying into the household. The master's either claiming her for himself or for his son. She is coming in as a sexual partner to either the master or his son, not to both. For that reason, she cannot go free the way male servants go free because she's become a permanent member of the household. She cannot be used and then discarded. She cannot be exploited. Now, the word sells it just makes me want to cringe, and I haven't been able to figure out a better way to translate this. Maybe even it would be better to say if a man arranges a marriage for his daughter as an amah. I think that would be closer to the sense here. He's not selling her in the sense of like she's a piece of property. all marriages were arranged by the male heads of households, and all marriages involved a transfer of wealth, exchange of wealth between two families. So this is not an exception to that. There's still a transfer of funds. In this case, what's different is the money is only going in one direction. So the man who's arranging the marriage for his daughter is unable to pay a dowry. He can't send her with a sizable sum of money that functions as a kind of social safety net for her if the marriage doesn't work out. He doesn't have any money to offer. And so the man who is taking the woman into his household is agreeing to a less than ideal scenario, in that he's giving money to the father, but he's not receiving money connected to the woman who's coming into his household. So this is a kind of charity case. There's compassion involved. And because she's sexually connected to the household, she cannot be discarded or sold when her childbearing years have ended, or if she proves to be infertile, because of the nature of her coming into the household. Again, she's not just doing the laundry or the dishes. Now, Deuteronomy 15 verse 12 seems to add another possible role for a woman in a household, that she could come in as a cleaning woman or a bread making woman or whatever, and she could go free after 7 years. So it introduces the possibility of a woman working but not marrying. This is a growth or a new social reality that's being acknowledged in Deuteronomy 15 that is not being acknowledged in Exodus 21. So the bottom line in this passage is that the laws here prevent the exploitation of this woman. She gets full marital rights. She's not to be passed from man to man in the household. He is supposed to treat her, if he claims her for his son, he must treat her in accordance with the rights of daughters. She becomes his daughter-in-law and is treated accordingly. She's not supposed to be treated as a second-class citizen. He is not allowed to get tired of her after a while and sell her to some Midianite slave traders who come by. He has to keep her as part of his household because he's taken responsibility for her. If he mistreats her, she's allowed to leave. Verse 11 says she can leave without making any payment to secure her release to go back to her family of origin, but he cannot sell her. Now, verse 10 presumes that the man is taking another woman, another wife, for himself. There are a number of situations under which this might have happened. Polygamy was never encouraged in the Old Testament, but there was one situation where it might be the right thing to do, and that is if a man died without any offspring, his widow was to be given to her brother-in-law, so that her brother-in-law could help carry on the family name of his dead brother. So there could be a situation in which a man takes another wife into the household, and it's not in violation of biblical law. If he does it for this good reason or for any bad reasons, he is not allowed to reduce her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. There's some debate about what these three items really are. The she'er that I've translated food is a rare word for food. It might refer to flesh of animals. It might also be an indication of the remainder or the food that's set aside for her. He's not allowed to take away. And then food, clothing, or marital rights. The word marital rights is onah, and onah is not a well understood word. It could refer to sexual access to the man that she has married. So if he takes another woman into the household, she doesn't lose that sexual access, because that would lose the possibility of bearing more children. It's also possible that this word refers to more generically to her upkeep or whatever ought to be provided for her as a married woman. So it could be ointment, it could be incense, it could be whatever it is, makeup, even something that she is due in that cultural context. he cannot short her just because another woman comes into the household. This tells us that she's supposed to be treated well. The law is seeking to maintain proper treatment. Now, that doesn't mean that a woman will always be treated well, but it means that Yahweh is on the side of proper treatment, and he is letting the Israelites know that they must treat the woman well. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, this is a tricky passage. It's best if you watch all the videos in this series on Exodus 21 to get the fuller picture. Before you go, I have one fun announcement to make. The new cover for my book for InterVarsity Press is out, so you can check it out on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. It's coming out October 28th. The book is Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters. It completes my trilogy for InterVarsity Press with Bearing God's Name and Being God's Image. I'm very, very excited about this book. If you are someone who has struggled to know whether it's worth your time to stay connected with the church, or you've thought, I don't really need to go to church. I've got YouTube, I've got other resources, podcasts, I can listen to music on Spotify. Why bother going to church? In this book, I'm trying to make the case for why it's not only valuable for you to go to church, but why you cannot be who God has created you to be without it. I tell lots of stories, but mostly I trace the theme through Scripture of the people of God gathered in community around the presence of God. It was a really fun book to write, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. So if you want to pre-order it, there's a link below. Have a great week.